Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you. I want to talk about land and how we need to change what we mean when we talk about sanitation, if we think about land differently. So there are many different ways in which land and sanitation are linked, but I want to point out that there seems to be something curious going on. There's a puzzle at the center of the way in which we understand the possibilities for improvements in sanitation for people who lack adequate sanitation. So those people who are living in informal settlements or on off-grid and using off-grid on-site systems. Now, what's interesting is that land and property rights are at the very heart of the attempts to improve sanitation. So if you look, for example, at the Sustainable Development Goals, they all talk about access, right? And access is a mix of the rights to enter and use a space for something. So we see access and by implication property rights right up front. So the goal 6, it says ensure access to water and sanitation for all. And access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene is the most basic human need for health and well-being. And target 6.2 of SDG 6 says, by 2030, we will achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and end open defecation, paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. So access is really central, and we know that access is a mixture of where things are located, who has rights to construct and to use, who has obligations to construct and use, and where these rights come from, who recognizes them and who enforces them. Now, the puzzle is that even though access and property rights seem to be so central, and it looks like these goals and these ways of understanding sanitation improvements take property rights seriously, the argument that I want to put to you today is that they do not. They do not take land and property rights seriously. What these goals and ways of understanding sanitation improvements do is they give or improve a right to access. But what they don't consider is that this is in a world of property rights that is already divided up unfairly in a way that has property rights and rights to things that already discriminates, for example, in terms of gender. And in particular, I want to draw out 2 ways in which it is a problem. So the first way is that it positions the right to sanitation as an individual right. We heard Tim and Desi saying that, drawing attention to that in Mwanza. In other words, the individual has to take responsibility to improve their sanitation. But this ignores that individual rights are in a system that is unequal and that people have unequal abilities to improve the situation for themselves. The second way is that it enters, this idea of improving sanitation enters a world that's already unequal, is that it seems to operate only within the state's legal system, and it ignores the customary and informal legal systems that exist in all of the cities in which we work in. So, for example, in a study of Beira, one of the researchers has noticed that the authorities tend to forget that the land needed for infrastructure, like wastewater treatment plants, always already belongs to someone. So what does this mean? The first thing I think, and I'd like to argue for, is that we need a more explicit understanding of what we mean when we say access and the world of rights that already exist. And the second thing I think it means is that we need to change the definition of sanitation itself. And we need to recognize that sanitation and land are not two separate things, but somehow that they're part of the same thing. So the definition of sanitation can already be acknowledging how land and rights to things are part of that process. And I think that in doing that, it'll be easier to talk about the inequalities that are getting in the way of hampering sanitation improvements.